Stephanie Ruhle, these numbers are grim. And what do they tell us?
Well, these numbers aren't really representative of sort of how brutal the picture is, because remember, it's a full backward-looking picture from last month before this thing really hit. The number that is the most relevant, without a doubt, is yesterday's jobless claims topping 6 million. And think about this. Yesterday's number of just above 6 million is even worse, because in the last week, we know thousands, if not millions of Americans have been desperately trying to log on to their state's websites, call unemployment offices so they can file for unemployment, but they haven't been able to. And it's not the fault of any of these states. People want to offer these unemployment benefits, but the surge is just unmanageable. So the number is brutal. And what it tells us is, for any of those states out there who say, oh, this thing isn't that hitting that far and wide, it's just the hot spots, that's not the case. And the one thing I would say that's a slight positive, it means that we're listening to the health professionals who said we need to shut this country down if we're going to address coronavirus. And when you look at those unemployment numbers, clearly they're showing that we are.
All right, Chris Lu, a lot of folks are already looking at recovery, what it's going to look like, what shape it's going to take. Can we even talk about a recovery without a sense of mass uniform testing, as well as antibody testing, and also a vaccine?
Well, that's exactly right. We can't get to that recovery point until we actually get past this public health crisis. And we don't even have a great sense of where this economy is at the moment. As Stephanie just said, this is really the tip of the iceberg in terms of bad economic news. To lose 700,000 jobs in 1 month is staggering. But to reference again, this is really only covers up to the first half of March. A lot of the states had imposed shelter-in-place orders after that. So this doesn't include the 10 million people who have applied for unemployment. And when you dig into these numbers, about 450,000 of the job losses were in leisure and hospitality, relatively few in retail, and we're going to see those numbers start to go up. And largely untouched by this is kind of business and professional services, sort of high-wage, salary jobs. That's what you're going to start to see in the second wave of job losses. And you're right. I mean, this is kind of a momentous day in a kind of a bad way that a 9.5-year streak of job gains is now over. And I think the only question at this point is how severe this downturn is going to be and how long it's going to last.
Hey, Steph, it's Willie. I want to ask you about something I know you've been covering closely for the last couple of days, and that is the rollout today of that $350 billion in loans to small businesses from the Small Business Association, the PPP, as they're calling it, Paycheck Protection Program. I've heard from big banks, Chase, Bank of America, who say they don't quite know the guidelines here. They're not sure how this is supposed to work. I'm hearing last night and again this morning from someone, a friend of mine who runs a mid-sized regional bank in the South, who says they are flying blind in terms of the guidelines. They want to help all their customers. They want to get all these loans out, but effectively they're being asked to loan out their own capital at 1% or something like that. And the government's saying, we'll get you back later. So what more can you tell us about these guidelines, how it works, and how we get this money to small businesses?
And here's the thing. They can't trust the fact that the government's saying, we'll get you back later. Banks are one of the most highly regulated business, right? Think about this for a moment. This is $350 billion that can be forgivable. This thing is going to be rife with fraud. If you think about all of the unworthy organizations that are going to be applying for these loans, okay? And I'm not saying there are any bad actors behind this. Bravo to Congress, bravo to the Treasury and the SBA for wanting to do this, and to those 1,700 banks who want to get this money to their customers. But the SBA and the Treasury didn't even get the guidelines to these banks until last night. Right. They can't turn this around in less than 24 hours. I myself spoke to the people running this at Chase and B of A and Wells, who said, we want to get this done. How can we do it? And those smaller community banks don't have a chance. And it's wholly irresponsible. When you watch last night's press conference, literally, Steve Mnuchin was standing at the podium like Oprah Winfrey, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. And it just doesn't work that way. And to say that to the 30 million small businesses in America who do not have 2 months of liquidity, who are desperate for this money, it's disingenuous at best. Even the fact that he said, just call up one of the FDIC banks, that's factually incorrect. You cannot just call a random bank. You can only do this with a bank where you are an existing customer. It is against the law because these banks can only do this with existing clients who they've already vetted through Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering rules. And Steve Mnuchin knows that.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.